When I ask you what is a chromosome, you say it has something to do with genes, not the kind you wear, but the kind you pass on to your offspring. It's thread-like. Anybody got anything else to add to that from the vocabulary sheet? Structure. Has protein in it. Okay, something about protein. What else? It's got protein, genes, thread-like. So did somebody say DNA? Okay, you were thinking it. We'll count that. So some protein, some DNA. What's protein? I'm going to focus on these. What? Helps you grow, helps you build muscle. If you're weightlifting, very often people who are weightlifters eat extra protein. They might take protein powder and put it in a shake. What is protein?
It's
Meat is a protein. Meat is made of protein.
I don't even know.
Exactly. I know. Isn't it amazing? You've been hearing about protein your whole life. Like, you need more protein. Here's some protein powder. Are you getting enough protein? And yet, what is protein exactly?
They're biomolecules.
I'm impressed that you can look things up and read. So, okay, meat is protein. Let's think about a raw piece of steak. That is strands of protein. Your muscles are made up of protein. A cow's muscles are made up of protein. Proteins are actually just these molecules. Yeah, there are a couple different kinds of chemicals. Proteins are a whole class of them. They're a whole group of chemicals. And we're going to represent protein in the cell with these little guys. So the protein that underlies, you can take one. The protein that underlies chromosomes are these sort of long structures of protein. You can have purple if you want. Okay. There are these long protein structures. So imagine like a piece of beef jerky. Doesn't it? Just this long strand of protein. Okay. And I will take a picture of one. So we've got this pipe cleaner that's representing a protein. Well, we said chromosomes are protein and DNA. What's DNA?
Cells that make up your body.
Okay. Stuff that makes you who you are. I like that piece.
Isn't DNA the same?
Not exactly. No. So what is DNA? Stuff that makes you who you are. Stuff that makes you what you are.
Does it have anything to do with your appearance or no?
It does have to do with your appearance, yeah. Whether you have blonde hair or dark hair or green eyes or red eyes, what you might pass on to your offspring. What is DNA? At its very simplest, I'll tell you that DNA is just a chemical. But DNA happens to be this really squirrely, long, stringy, ropey, difficult to manage, messy chemical. We could represent it with this here yarn that I'm making a complete mess out of. There's some DNA. So how on earth do you manage something as unwieldy as... And DNA is a chemical. It happens to be a chemical that really, seriously, literally is this long, crazy chain molecule. So it's very much like a piece of yarn. How do you manage all of this mess to pack it into a cell? How do you keep this organized? This is a disaster. Aha. What if you were to wrap it around a protein? Just like yarn, DNA is made up of multiple strands, and if you look at the end of that piece of yarn before you start to wrap it, you can divide it into two parts. You can look at the other end if you already started one. And this yarn is actually, it's got 4 plies to it. The DNA is like a 2-ply. Okay, there are like 2 strands that are wrapped around one another, very much like this yarn is wrapped. There are the multiple strands, and I'll show you the chromosome that I made earlier today. This was a little piece of, purple pipe cleaner, and it's totally covered. So if you do this really well, and I did it sort of half well, you won't see any pipe cleaner sticking out, peeking out, and it's all one nice even layer. And then just tie it off. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Just tie it off, and you can cut off the excess or tear it off. That's okay. But this is a chromosome, or a representation of a chromosome. Okay? So there's a picture of my mock chromosome. And it's just a pipe cleaner that's covered in yarn. That's kind of representative of what a chromosome is. A chromosome is this chunk of protein, and you wrap the DNA around it. And boy, it's a whole lot easier to keep something like a long, messy piece of string if you've got it neatly stored, wrapped around something else. You know, this is like bundling up your rope in the garage or the barn. This is like making sure that your fishing tackle, you know, that all of your lines are neatly hooked into something so that your line doesn't get all tangled up when it's in the garage over the winter. It's easier to keep track of. It's easier to use. So this is kind of like putting a paper clip on a bunch of papers. You've got all of this information neatly stored. Now, the next question. So the next question, we know what chromosomes are. They're, you know, these pieces of protein all wrapped up with DNA. Where do we keep these chromosomes? Where do these chromosomes exist in your body?
In the DNA.
Well, they are made of DNA. They don't exist in the DNA.
In bloodstream.
No.
Inside the cells in the blood.
Okay, inside cells. Inside cells. So here's a sort of generic cell. You know, cells are just bags of water, right? They're little bags made up of fat. It's like little Ziploc bags with water in them. That's what a cell is. Is there a special place inside that fatty bag where the DNA is kept? Where? In the nucleus. So inside every one of those bags, there's a smaller bag. Well, there's a nucleus in an atom and there's a nucleus in a cell. They're different things, but they're both called nucleus. So this is the nucleus. And that's where all your DNA is kept. Nucleus, and this is a cell. That's where all the DNA is kept in bananas and maple trees and mice and earthworms and ladybugs and soybean plants and that fern over there. All of those things keep all their DNA in the nucleus of their cells. Now, which cells? You got a lot of cells, don't you? Huh? In fat cells, you would find your DNA. So let's start listing, because the next question I had was, which cells? So to which cells, you say in fat cells, and I say, yep. If we took a sample of a fat cell from you, from a chicken, from a turkey, from a mouse, from a soybean plant, they have fat in them too, that's how we get soybean oil. If we took a fat cell from any living thing, it would have that living thing's DNA in it. What other kind of cells have your DNA in them? Have you ever watched a crime show?
Yeah.
Okay, when they take a DNA swab from somebody, how do they do it?
They do it with the mouth and the saliva.
They take a Q-tip and they rub the inside of your cheek.
Or a nail.
Or, yeah, they can take a nail or a piece of hair. And they rub the inside of the cheek because those cells come off really easily. Okay, and those are just, you know, so we could say cheek cell. So you say cheek cell, I say, yep, that's got all your DNA in it. So every single cell in your cheek has all your DNA. Every single one of your fat cells has all your DNA. What other cells would have your DNA in them? What if I took a... They're actually an exception, but we'll talk about that later. What if I took a cell out of a muscle in your thigh? Would that have your DNA in it? Yeah, a muscle cell. So if you said, yeah, if I took a muscle cell out of your body, would it have your DNA in it? Yeah, it would. And if we take a muscle cell from a steak, Because remember, that's just a muscle from a cow, a formerly living cow. If we took a muscle cell out of that one steak, we could test its DNA, we could trace it back to the cow. Well, of course, the cow's dead now, or we wouldn't be talking about the steak. But we could trace it back to the cow's mother on a farm someplace. If we took a banana and we mushed it all up and we extracted its DNA, we could trace that banana back to the banana tree that it came from. So if a banana tree commits a crime, don't forget, they can trace it. Same for a strawberry or an onion or a piece of lettuce or an earthworm. They have unique DNA, unique to that individual. What if we took a cell out of your liver? Would it have your DNA in it? Yeah, you bet it would. It would have your DNA in it. Here's the upshot. Okay, so the upshot of this is that all of your cells, except gametes, they're an important exception, we'll talk about them in a little bit, have all of your DNA stored in chromosomes in the nucleus of their cells. So every cell in your body, except we said blood cells are weird, but they start off with your DNA. Every cell in your body except your gametes has all of your DNA. Every single last bit of it. If you have dry skin and you scratch your arm and you leave a trail of skin flakes, I'm really flaky this time of year. I'm very flaky this time of year. I'm leaving a trail of my DNA. They may want to follow me around. If I wanted to commit a crime, there would be piles of my dead skin at the scene. I'm sure they could connect me to the crime, so I best not commit a crime. It's not the only reason. But yeah, all of the cells in your body have the same DNA. They have all of your DNA stored in the form of chromosomes. So the next question is this: how many chromosomes do you have? How many chromosomes do you have?
A lot.
A lot? Okay, define a lot.
Like thousands, millions, trillions.
Well, you have millions of cells. Actually, I think you might have trillions of cells. You don't have trillions of chromosomes, though. You do not have trillions of chromosomes. Anybody have any number that sticks out for them in terms of how many chromosomes you have? 3 dozen? You're pretty close.
3 dozen.
You're pretty close.
5 dozen.
You have 46. You have 46 chromosomes. So in every cell in your body, when we go back and we say, in your fat cells, how many chromosomes in the nucleus? 46. In your cheek cells, how many chromosomes in the nucleus? 46. In your muscle cells, how many chromosomes in the nucleus? 46. In your liver cells, how many chromosomes in the nucleus? 46. And they all look, well, kind of like that. They're just this thread of protein wrapped up in DNA. You can actually take a picture of all the chromosomes, and those 46 exist in pairs. So there are 46. You have 23 pairs. Whoops. So there's pair number 1, and you have a little set of chromosomes, and they're going to be the same chromosomes. They're going to have the same genes on them. Where did you get one copy of chromosome number 1? From your mama. From your mama. You got one copy of chromosome number 1 from your mother. Where'd you get the other copy of chromosome number 1? Your dad. You have chromosome number 2. You have 2 copies of chromosome number 2. Where'd you get one copy of chromosome number 2? From your mama. Where'd you get the other copy of chromosome number 2? From your dad. Chromosome number 3. You have 2 copies. You got a copy from your mother and a copy. You have a maternal and a paternal copy of every single chromosome. So we can take a picture of all these chromosomes, which is just amazing to me. It's called a karyotype. And when we line them all up and look at them, they look like, whoops, cancel. They look like this. And that's an actual image of all the chromosomes in one person's body. So there are the 2 copies of chromosome 1, 2 copies of chromosome 2, 2 copies of chromosome 3, 2 copies of chromosome 4. And I think these little markers are something that they've imposed on the picture. Well, some of them are really tiny. They're different sizes. So chromosome number 1 has a lot more genes on it than chromosome number 21. Chromosome 21 doesn't have a whole lot of genes on it. And they're sort of numbered in order of descending size. So your biggest chromosomes are the first and second pair.
There's a certain chromosome you have 3 of, and you're like mentally.
Yes, we're going to talk about that. That's trisomy. So you get 2 copies of each of these if everything goes perfectly. Now the first 22 chromosomes, they're just called chromosomes 1 through 22, and you get 2 copies of chromosome 1 and 2 copies of chromosome 18. And these are called autosomes. Auto like a car. Okay. So pairs or numbers 1 through 22 are autosomes. And those autosomes, we could say that they're kind of like general purpose chromosomes. So your hair color, your eye color, knowing your body having known how to build bones and a heart and lungs and muscles, and knowing how to clot blood and knowing how to make blood clotting factors and knowing how to make the chemicals that keep oxygen in and out of your lungs. Your body is doing all this stuff right now. Do you get that? It's amazing. And all the instructions for doing that are on chromosomes 1 through 22. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. There are instructions on those 22 chromosomes, those 44 chromosomes, for how to do all that, for how to build you. I mean, let alone what color your eyes are, or how pointy your nose is, or if your ears are connected or hangy, or if your pinkies are crooked or not. I mean, let alone all that. But like all the stuff your body's actually doing, how your cells are processing sugar, how your cells are making energy, how your intestines are absorbing nutrients. The instructions for how to do that are in those first 44 chromosomes in the form of genes.
The 22 because they're the same.
Well, they can have usually one or the other variation of a gene. Those are the alleles. Yeah, so like, if we look at alleles on this, we might see a big N here and a little n there for something, because you get 2 copies. These last 2 chromosomes are different. So these are, we said, general purpose. These are the sex chromosomes. Okay, so the first 22 are general purpose, just body functions. The last 2, the X and the Y chromosome, are called your sex chromosomes. And it's chromosome pair 23. 21 is the trisomy that causes Down syndrome. We're going to talk about that. The sex chromosomes are X and Y, and you learned about these a little bit with your beaver gametes. If you have 2 copies of the X, that's biological female. If you have 1 copy of the X, 1 copy of the Y, that's biological male. Is this karyotype a male or a female? Female, because you can see 2 X's right there. And she has no Y. So this is a female. Let me show you a picture of a male karyotype. Huh? No, it's different. Look, he's got 1 X, 1 Y.
No, it's the same one as that.
Oh, it is, but it's the image, not the screenshot. So the other stuff's off the edge. So this is a male, and he's got 1 copy or 2 copies of number 1, 2 copies of number 2, blah, blah, blah. He's only got 1 X, and his other sex chromosome is a Y. So that's the standard arrangement. Okay, so we said that you had 23 pairs. You got 23 from one parent, 23 from the other parent. Okay, that's reasonable. And so your liver cells, your skin cells, your muscle cells, your bone cells, all those cells have 46 chromosomes. So how do we make a new person? Let me first introduce a term. The term is diploid, and this is in your vocab. The prefix di, di, refers to how many? Di and bi both mean two. Yeah, di and bi both mean two. A diploid cell has 2 copies of each chromosome. So a diploid cell has 2 copies of each chromosome. It's got 2 copies of chromosome number 1, 2 copies of chromosome number 2. It's got the full number of chromosomes. And in humans, that's 46. Not all species have the same number of chromosomes. Carrots have 2,000 and some. Fruit flies have 4. But humans have 46. It's a nice number. We're right there in the middle. I think chimpanzees have 44, and there's evidence of a fusion into the short chromosomes. So a diploid cell has 2 copies of each chromosome. It's got the full number of chromosomes. It's got 46 chromosomes in its nucleus. So here's our little diploid cell, and I'm just going to write 46 in there. Now, how did you grand and glorious creatures all start off? I mean, way back. Old school. How'd you start off? Sperm and egg. Took 2 cells, smashed them together, you get 1 new cell. What happens if we smash together 2 cells that each have 46 chromosomes? What do we get? Huh? Yeah, exactly. That's a problem. These are the instructions for building a person, or a carrot, or a maple tree, or a blue whale, or an earthworm, or a ladybug. You know, but in this case, we're talking about 46 and 46. That's instructions for building a person. What if I give you 2 different sets of instructions and ask you to follow them both at the same time? Does that work? No. 46 plus 46 is just a big old no. You can't get a new person out of 46 plus 46. You can't put together too many sets of instructions, because if there are too many sets of instructions, it doesn't work. So what kind of cells did you start off as? Well, we'll make this a recognizable shape. What are they? Egg and sperm. Well, guess what? Inside an egg cell and a sperm cell, guess how many chromosomes you have? 23. Isn't that convenient? Because guess what? When you put together 23 and 23, what do you get?
46.
You get the right number. And you get 23 from yo mama, and you get 23 from yo papa. And that gives you the correct number of chromosomes. Now, a cell that has half the normal number of chromosomes, is called a haploid cell. I'm going to write that up here. So a cell that has half the number of chromosomes is a haploid cell. So a haploid cell has half the total number of chromosomes. That's 23 in humans. So gametes in all species that reproduce sexually, gametes are haploid cells. Now, you had a question about, aren't there some cases where you get an extra chromosome? And there are. We've talked about a few of them. There are several examples of things where you get an extra chromosome. It's called a trisomy. And the most famous is trisomy of 21. And trisomy 21, generally what this means, so they've got an extra copy of chromosome 21. Somebody who has trisomy 21 has 3 copies of the 21st chromosome. And what that means typically is that when this egg cell was created, and it usually is the egg. It's usually not the sperm, though there are trisomies that occur from the sperm. When that egg cell was created, it didn't divide all the chromosomes the way it was supposed to. So when the woman's body made this egg cell, her body made one egg cell that had 22 and one that had 24, because they're actually divided out of a normal diploid cell. So if that 22 chromosome egg is the one that gets fertilized, that's a problem. If the 24 chromosome egg gets fertilized, that's a problem. Now, trisomy 21, Down syndrome, is one of the few conditions where it's survivable. Remember I said we erased it already. If you have 46 and 46, you got too many sets of instructions and the creature doesn't work. You can't make a baby bunny or a maple tree or a daffodil or a new earthworm or a ladybug or a new soybean plant or anything else with two full sets of instructions. When you have any new organism that has the wrong number of chromosomes, usually that just doesn't go. So you might have a seed, like the seeds you bought for your garden, that just doesn't germinate. With humans, do you understand that most pregnancies end before a woman even knows she's pregnant? Like a huge percentage of pregnancies end long before a woman even has any hint that she's pregnant. So a fertilization occurs, and maybe there's an issue with the sperm, maybe there's an issue with the egg, too many chromosomes usually, and it just doesn't go. It doesn't implant. There's no pregnancy. A lot more pregnancies end in the first few weeks of a pregnancy, very often because there's the wrong number of chromosomes. And if you have the wrong number of chromosomes, in most cases, that can't become a human. It's what we call a fatal flaw. So it's a fatal exception. If you've ever had your computer come up and say, fatal exception, it's a fatal exception. There are a few cases where a human can survive with an extra copy of a chromosome. And chromosome 21 is one of them. So if you have 3 copies of chromosome 21, you have Down syndrome. And with trisomy 21, there are specific features that show up. So there are some distinctions to the facial features. Babies who have Downs typically have very weak muscle tone. They roll over later than other babies. They walk later than other babies. Their grasp is not as good as other babies because they have weak muscle tone. There are typically some cognitive issues with trisomy. And trisomy 21, Down syndrome, what's amazing, they're mild to moderate cognitive issues. And these days, there are people with Downs who go through and complete a regular high school education and go on to hold jobs and live independently. We didn't used to do that, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We just assumed that they couldn't do anything. And you kind of don't know what somebody can do until you let them try. I have a cousin who works at the Sheltered Workshop, and she's in her 50s. I've talked about her. And her brother, my other cousin, has always said, Wendy's capable of a lot more than Mom ever let her do. And she probably is. But she's in her 50s. 40 years ago, she was lucky that they let her go. I mean, not that my aunt and uncle let her go, but that that society let her go to school at all. I mean, she's lucky that Bycroft existed. That she had some opportunity, and she's got a life, and she's happy. She gets to go someplace every day. She has friends. She has a job. She has something worthwhile to do. That's important. Humans deserve that. So now there's a young lady right now who has Downs whose goal is to become an international model. Have you seen pictures of her?
She's a redhead.
Yeah, redhead. And, she's saying, look, you don't know what I can do until you let me try. There are other trisomies that have more serious cognitive deficits. There's trisomy 13 and 18 are both survivable, though I think it's one of them. I think it's trisomy 18. They say, there are infants born with trisomy 18, but most of them don't live out their first year. The damage is pretty severe. They have severe cognitive issues. Their brains aren't developed the same way, and many of them do not survive at all. There are also trisomies that occur with the sex chromosomes. So you can also have, we said XX is female, XY is male. Not YY. XY is a trisomy. Pardon?
If you have YY.
You can't, because your father would have to contribute a sperm that had 2Y, and your mother would have to contribute a sperm that had no X's, and that's not a survivable defect. So there are individuals who are XXY, that's Klinefelter syndrome. There are also individuals who are XO. So they get a sperm that doesn't bear an X or a Y, and they end up as XO. And one of those is Turner syndrome, one of those is Klinefelter's. I get them confused. There are also triple X individuals. There are individuals who get XXX. And so this is biologically female. And this is biologically male. XXX, triple X syndrome, those people they appear as biologically female. XXY, I believe, appears as biologically female, though internally they very often have very tiny testes. They typically experience breast development. They look biologically female. Tend to be much taller females. And I think there may be some cognitive deficits with that one. And I know XO, and I know somebody who is XO. And XO, that must be Turner's. They typically, there are some characteristics, physical characteristics that are common to XO women. They present as biologically female. I think XO women do not typically develop a uterus, so they can't have children of their own. There was a woman I knew in college who's, we're all 20 and we're talking about having kids someday or whatever. She said, "Well, not me." "Oh, you already know that?" She said, "No, don't have a uterus." "Oh,
Interesting.
okay."
Is it possible to be born with female and male parts?
Yes. So there are three things here. There is biological sex, which is your plumbing. That's your genitals. That's if you have a penis or you have a vagina, if you have a uterus and ovaries, or if you have testes. That's biologically male or female. And these three things, interestingly enough, happen at three different points in pregnancy, and they are chemical. They are a result of the chemical environment that is bathing the fetus. There is also gender, which is if you feel like a boy or a girl. And this one's harder to put a grip on because it's not about liking pink or frilly stuff. I'm not particularly girly. I've never been called a girly girl. I was called a tomboy, and I didn't particularly like pink frilly stuff, but I feel like a girl. I've never felt like I wasn't a girl. So there's your sex, there's your gender, and then there's who you want to kiss. And that basically lines up to, do you want to kiss people who have the same genitals you do, or do you want to kiss people who have different genitals than you do? And those three things are all chemical, and they all occur in the brain, in utero, and they happen at different times. So not only is there the lineup of, do your genitals match what you feel like? And we hear a lot more about this these days. It's very out in the open. It didn't used to be. Do you have boy parts and feel like you're a boy? Great, life's easy. Do you have boy parts and you feel like you're a girl? Life's a little tougher for you.
There was a guy that came to my house, and he was taken by
Hormones.
hormones, and he was turning into a girl.
Well,
And I really thought he was a girl, and then talked.
and
with
if he's living as a female, then he's a trans woman. Yes. So there's that, and then there's who you want to kiss, and there's the most common lineup where what your plumbing is, what you feel like, and who you want to kiss is sort of the majority condition. You have a penis, you feel like you're a boy, you want to kiss girls. You're not going to get bullied over that. You're born with a vagina, you feel like a girl, you want to kiss boys. You're not going to get bullied over that. Anything other than the usual lineup, and you may face some challenges. It's normal for you. There's a difference between what's normal and what's common. So the most common lineup makes your life the easiest. What you're talking about, the other part is that there are people who are born with what are called ambiguous genitals. So, baby comes out, the first thing they do is, it's a boy, it's a girl. There are babies for whom the baby comes out and they say,
We're not sure what this is.
we're not sure. Which as a parent would be pretty hard.
Yeah, so you'd have to pick.
Well, they used to do that. They used to just impose a gender, and now they typically let the child grow a little bit to see what the child feels like they are.
Yeah.
You keep that. You keep your chromosomes. We're going to talk about those some more. Have a good night, folks.